Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate you. Before I begin this presentation, I'd take a moment of silence to honor those that have lost their life or their lives have been affected from an unimpaired driver or a crash. Thank you. I'd like to tell you a story about a man in a dream. There was this man who was big and tall, and everybody liked him, but most of all, he was the cheerful kind, you know the sort, fun to watch on the basketball court. He was a working man, good with his hands, with lots of goals and lifelong plans. Then one night out for a drive, he threw it all away and left it behind. You see, this is not just a story about a man in a dream. This is based on the life of a man named Dean. My name is Dean, and when asked as a child what it was that I wanted to be in life, never did I imagine that I'd be right here, right now, telling this story to you. In fact, the one thing I would have told you I wanted more than anything else in life was to be an active, present father. My dad left my mom when I was 1 and left her with 4 kids. And we went to foster care, and she went to the state hospital, and later I was placed back with her. She never dated, never remarried my whole life growing up. So I gave a lot of thought of what it would be like to have a father, to have a dad, to have a man in my life. And I thought about how important that would be when I had kids of my own, how I'd be involved, active, and present in their life. At the age of 18, I became a father. Was in nearly a 10-year relationship, and in that relationship we had 2 sons, ages 4 and 7, with a baby girl on the way. The night before my wife's baby shower for our 3rd child, my best friend and I had decided that we were going to go out for a couple of drinks. We were going to go out for an hour. And then we were going to come back and take the kids skating. Well, one drink led to another, and I ended up going to 3 clubs that night. I consumed a total of 6 Long Island iced teas with a pounder of Hefeweizen and a double shot of scotch for the road. I don't know why that is, but it seems like I always had to have one for the road. As we walked outside, I approached the cab, and I asked him how much he would charge to take me home, and he said $20. In my mind, I thought that he was trying to rip me off. I personalized it, because everywhere else in town was just $5, but because I was going a short distance in the opposite direction, he wanted to charge me $20. Didn't seem right. So I told him I would drive myself. As I walked to my van, I reached for my keys and realized they were not there. My friend had pulled them from his coat, and I told him to go ahead and drive. He started to walk around the front of the van, and he stopped and he hesitated. He said, "Man, I've never driven a van before, man. I don't feel comfortable driving your vehicle. Are you good to drive?" I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm good to drive." So he tossed me the keys, and I grabbed them out of the air, and I walked over to the van, and I put that key in the keyhole. You see, I'd always told myself that as long as I could put that key in that keyhole with no problems, I was good to drive. The problem with that is I got good at that. That choice from that decision led me down the wrong way on a one-way street, where I collided head-on with another vehicle, passenger to passenger. You can see from the images the damage to the vehicles. You can see the impact that it had. The passenger in the van, my best friend, he was life-flighted to Legacy Emanuel Hospital for his head trauma. The passenger in the blue Honda, she passed on sight. The driver of that vehicle lay trapped in his vehicle while he listened to his best friend take her last breath and had to sit trapped while she perished in front of him. There were 2 other passengers in the back of that Honda who suffered severe trauma and severe injuries. I went to the hospital because of my injuries. I had broke my wrist. I had shattered my ankle. I had broke my collarbone. There were police all around and investigators and people telling me I had done all these awful things, that I was responsible for someone losing their life, that I was responsible for causing serious injuries to multiple people. Because of my head trauma, I couldn't remember the events of that night. I was argumentative. I was defiant. I was a jerk. For 2 days, I laid in the hospital without knowing the events of that night other than what was being told to me. At one point, I had reached back with my hand the best that I could and felt this injury on my head that 3 of my fingers could fit in. And I was trying to think to myself, how did I get these injuries? How was I sitting? What was going on? What had happened? I can't describe it. All I can tell you is that in the blink of an eye, my memory came back. From the time I left my house to the crash, everything played in my mind. And in that moment, I was hit with a heavy weight of grief. I can only explain it as like a 500-pound blanket being laid on you, that's smothering you. It's hard to breathe. Your heart is racing. See, in that moment, my first thought was I failed my children because I was going to prison. I know I should. My second thought was, how do you say you're sorry to a mom and dad for taking the life of their loved one in a way that was so easily avoidable? How do you do that? What does that look like? What do you say? I had said I was sorry a million times in my life, and those words had meant something, and I meant them. But what I learned in that moment was saying you're sorry would take action. Because I put myself in their shoes and I asked myself, what could someone possibly say to me? There's nothing that someone could possibly say to me to show me they were sorry. It would take action. They'd have to change their life. I vowed on that day that I would live my life differently. I vowed on my day that I would spend my life righting my wrongs. That I would do what I could to try and make my wrongs to right. I went to trial because I did not have a clear understanding of man 1, manifest extreme indifference to value human life, versus man 2, recklessness. So I valued life. And I also, because of the distraction in my vehicle that night, felt like I'd acted recklessly. And remembering that detail meant something to me, because it was a lot easier sharing some of that guilt than carrying it all. So I went to trial. And as a result of that, I was found guilty on all 9 counts. I was given 120 months for man 1. I received a sentence of 70 months for assault 2. I received another sentence of 70 months for assault 2. I received another sentence of 70 months for assault 2, which they ran half concurrent, half non-concurrent. I was also found guilty of assault 3, DUI, reckless driving times 2, and reckless endangering another person. I was sentenced to 25 and a half years in prison in Oregon under Measure 11 because it was clear to the court, clear to the people, clear to the victims in my case, that my intentions were to go out and drink and get drunk and drive with no other plan. Being convicted under Measure 11 in the state of Oregon means you serve every day of that sentence. There is no good time. There's no early release. You serve every day of that. Now I want to make it clear, it was my choices, my decisions, my actions, and my behavior that took the life of somebody. My choices, my actions, my decisions, my behavior that seriously injured multiple people. It was my choices, my actions, my decisions, and my behavior that caused a ripple of harm to all of the victims in my case, their families, trauma nurses, doctors, and the ripple goes on and on. I am responsible for that, no one else. I'm responsible for taking the life of someone who had their whole life in front of them. I'm responsible for a young man having to lay trapped in his vehicle while he watched his best friend take her last breath and then lay trapped as he watched her get cut from the vehicle and himself. I'm responsible for a mother and a father receiving a phone call in the middle of the night saying that there is reason to believe that your daughter has been involved in a fatal head-on collision and you are needed to come down here to identify her. I'm responsible for a father having to do just that. He had to drive over 4 hours to go identify his daughter after a terrible crash. I can't imagine what that drive was like. I can imagine he was hoping it wasn't her. I'm responsible for 2 young women who suffered severe vehicle injuries because of my choices to drink and drive. I'm responsible for them having to sit outside the vehicle and watch their best friend get cut from the vehicle, and also responsible for them watching their best friend take her last breath. I'm responsible for my best friend getting life-flighted to a manual hospital because of his head trauma. I'm responsible for an officer who broke his back fleeing my best friend from the vehicle. I'm responsible for abandoning my wife and leaving her with no vehicle. We lived out of town. The only way to take the kids to school, to get groceries, to go shopping, to go to work was with that vehicle. I took that from them. I'm responsible for them losing their home they were growing up in. I'm responsible for my kids who had to give their dog away to the neighbor because they had to move and they couldn't take him with them, which was their best friend as a kid growing up. I'm responsible for my son and my daughter doing their final paper as a senior in high school of what it was like to grow up without a dad. And with a dad in prison because I chose to drink and drive. I'm responsible for causing more harm to the families in this case by taking the trial and not simply taking a plea deal, allowing them the proper time to grieve, heal, and process. And I said at the beginning of this was the story of a man in a dream. I have hope. I have hope that I said something here today that would cause you to think twice before you got behind the wheel of a vehicle after you had been drinking or taking something that would cause you to be an impaired driver. I have hope that we can curb the statistics and reduce these incidents and injuries and deaths and crashes. I cannot do that on my own. I need your help. When you make choices like the choices that I made, there are no second chances. I take that back. There are no do-overs. There are no take-backs. This right now, this moment is your second chance. If you've ever gotten behind the wheel of a vehicle after you've been drinking or have taken something that caused you to be impaired, I'm asking you and begging you, please, think before you drink. Don't ever attempt to drink and drive. Some questions that people often ask me. The first one is, while you were in prison, were you able to stay in contact with your kids, and do you have a relationship with them now? I'll tell you, I can ask the question, who are fathers, who are mothers, who are husbands, who are wives, what's your job, what's your title, what gives you purpose? And I can tell you when you go to prison, you're none of those. Statistics show you will get divorced. Statistics shows that, yeah, you're still a father or you're still a mother, but having that relationship is extremely difficult. Being a construction worker, being a secretary, whatever that looks like, you're now an ID number when you go to prison. You're now a janitor is your first job you get, if you can get that job. You can't even usually get a job for the first 6 months that you're there. Prison costs money. It's not easy to survive. And if you don't know how to stick up for yourself, you will become somebody else's hustle. Those are things to think about when you're making that choice. Do I want to go to prison today? Not a choice, not something I thought about. My thoughts and my thinking that night were my actions aren't affecting nobody. If I get pulled over, I'm gonna get my car impounded. If I get pulled over, I might get arrested. If I get pulled over, I might go through diversion. If I get pulled over, I might go to jail and have to answer to my boss, which I might lose my job, but I could get another one. Those are all my thoughts that night. Never once did I think that I could hurt somebody or kill somebody or that my actions affected other people. That night in the hospital when I got my memory back, that was the third thing I learned that day. My addiction, my choices, they affect more people than just myself. And I should think more about that when I'm making decisions. I was able to maintain a relationship with my boys throughout prison and with my daughter. I had to get creative ways of writing letters because they move you across the state. They don't put you in the same town, the same area. That's not how they do things. They move you across the state, and it's difficult. First 9 years, I'll tell you, I had 4 visits in nine and a half years. 4 visits. 9.5 years. It took me to get moved to the valley so I could be closer to my kids. When I got out, I was able to keep a relationship with my boys. My daughter has decided that she didn't know me well before I went to prison, and therefore she wanted to continue to have a relationship with her stepfather versus having a relationship with me, and that's okay. I still support her in her choices and her decisions. It's still hard. That's not my choice, that's her choice. I was able to do things while I was incarcerated to better myself. I stuck to my goals, I stuck to my plan, I stuck to my beliefs. And it wasn't easy. For the first 11 years, I still continued to use, even though I wanted to make changes. I was taking classes and I was making changes, but my addiction told me, you don't have a problem with getting high. You don't have a problem with drinking. You have a problem with making choices after you use those things. So let's just go ahead and get high and make better choices. So my brain told me. So the disease told me. And while sitting in my cell in 2011, looking out my window, realizing I wasn't living up to my standards, I wasn't living up to my beliefs, I hadn't changed. I could see myself in the reflection of the window as I looked out through the yard, through the knuckle wire, the bars, the weight pile, the fences, the rovers. I hadn't changed. And it didn't sit well with me. And I made a choice in that moment that I would stop and I would live to my potential. And I did that. I set boundaries with my friends. I reinforced my boundaries with my friends. I got involved in the program. I started doing things to be part of the solution. And through that process, I was able to go through a mentoring program and work for an alcohol and drug program in DOC, where I was able to get certified as a recovery mentor, certified gambling recovery mentor, certified alcohol and drug counselor. And then later, I was able to get certified as a qualified mental health associate by working at another alcohol and drug program in DOC. I did that for 8.5 years. And when I got out, with the help of my fiance, I was able to remove some of the barriers that some have when you go to prison. I was able to get a job in the addictions field, working for the county as an alcohol and drug counselor, which is what I do now. I continue to live my life in a way moving forward. I continue to live my life in a way that I can make amends. I continue to live my life in a way that I'm being part of the community and working for the community and helping the community versus the person that I used to be. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And I just want to reiterate, please, think before you drink, remember me, and don't ever attempt to drink and drive. Remember that it's dead wrong. Have a plan. And I know what some of you were saying. You're like, you had a plan, dude. You asked a cab driver for a ride home. He told you $20. It's not a plan. If you're gonna go out and drink, take a cab to the club. That's a plan. Because then you're gonna take a cab home, right? If you're gonna go out and drink or go to a friend's house, have a designated driver. Not just having phone numbers is important. Using those numbers is important. Calling those people is important. At all costs, do whatever you need to do. Don't be that person who gets behind the wheel. Plan it out. You're gonna spend 40, 50 bucks at the club. Count yourself down for 40 bucks for a cab ride home and a cab ride there. Put it in your budget. 20 bucks for a ride home. Cost somebody their life. Seriously injured multiple people. Cost me 25.5 years of my life. $216,359.58 in restitution. 20 bucks. That's a plan. Every day I wish I would have done that. Don't be like me. Thank you very much.